sea does not care who you are. It does not care about your courage or your cutlass, your gold or your god. When it chooses to rise, when its black mood turns, even the fiercest pirate becomes small, a drifting speck beneath the breath of something ancient. For men who spent their lives chasing storms of another kind, war, plunder, rebellion, nothing terrified them more than the one they could not fight. Because when the horizon disappears, and the wind begins to scream like 1,000 knives, every man aboard knows this is judgment. It begins softly. A change in the air. The horizon darkens, the light turns bruised, and the gulls vanish. Every old sailor feels it first in his bones, a warning that travels through wood and flesh alike. The ship groans, restless. The ropes begin to hum, and then a silence brief and unnatural, a pause before the world tears open. The first gust hits like a cannonball. The sails snap, the timbers quake, and men scramble like ants on a floating coffin. Orders vanish in the wind's roar. Rain slashes the deck, stinging the eyes, turning everything slick and treacherous. And all at once, the sea that once carried them now tries to devour them. There is no enemy to outwit, no prize to chase, only survival. Pirates, the proud outlaws of the sea, lived by one unspoken rule: the ocean gives, and the ocean takes. And when the taking began, they had only their instincts to save them. But where did such instincts come from? How did men who were born on land learn to read the moods of the sea itself? To understand that, we must look deeper, beyond the waves, into the very nature of the waters they sailed. Storms ruled the waters that bred pirates: the Caribbean, the Atlantic, the coasts of Africa, and the Indian Ocean, each a graveyard of wood and bone. In the tropics, the heat brewed monsters, hurricanes that could flatten islands and swallow entire fleets. They came without mercy and always without warning. Maps meant nothing. Instruments were rare. The only tools a pirate had were his eyes, his ears, and the deep hum of his ship beneath his boots. Their vessels were not the grand warships of empires. They were lighter, quicker, hungrier, built not to conquer the sea but to survive it. A pirate ship was both blade and shield, fast enough to chase a merchantman, nimble enough to flee a man of war, and fragile enough that one wrong wave could split her in half. And yet, the men who sailed them did not fear death. They feared drowning, because drowning is not dying quickly, it is dying slowly, with the sound of your own breath filling with salt, the world shrinking to a hand's width of light before everything goes black. That was the sea's promise. And every pirate who signed the Articles of Brotherhood understood it. You will have gold. You will have glory, but one day you will face the storm. And when that day came, it didn't begin with thunder or lightning. It began with silence, and the quiet knowing that the battle ahead would be against nature itself. The sky turns to iron, the wind howls in every direction, and somewhere below deck a barrel breaks loose and rolls, crashing through the dark like a runaway beast. Every man becomes part of the ship. Hands on ropes, backs against pumps, voices swallowed by the roar. No rank, no pride, only movement. Reef the mainsail. Cut the anchor loose. Batten the hatches. The orders come from the captain, or the quartermaster if the captain has been thrown across the deck. There is no heroism here, only instinct. The pirates know their ship must become smaller, lighter, faster to live through the storm. Canvas is slashed to keep it from tearing. Masts are cut to save the hull. Everything not nailed down, crates, plunder, even cannons, is heaved into the Black Sea to lighten the load. Gold coins clatter across the deck and vanish into the waves. No man stops to grab them. In that moment, the sea owns everything. Below deck, the bilge fills fast. Men form a line at the pumps, working until their palms bleed, driving the water out before it can climb high enough to drown them in their own ship. The air grows thick and sweat, salt, panic. Each creak of the timbers sounds like a death rattle. Lightning tears the sky apart. For a split second, the world flashes white. Faces twisted, ropes whipping, the ship tilted so far she seems ready to roll. Then darkness again, only the sound of rain and prayers, and still they fight. Not with swords or cannons, but with rope, wood, and willpower. But even in chaos, something held them together. Something deeper than fear or obedience. It was the bond that made pirates more than thieves. A brotherhood that turned chaos into survival. Every pirate ship was a brotherhood. A democracy bound by necessity. In battle, that unity meant victory. In storms, it meant survival. Each man knew his place. One at the helm, wrestling with a wheel that could break bones. Others at the rigging, climbing through sleet and thunder to reef a flapping sail that could rip them off the mast in an instant. Some at the pumps, pushing water out faster than the ocean could pour it in. They worked barefoot so they could grip the deck. They tied ropes around their waists so the sea wouldn't take them when a wave swept over. And they sang, not to celebrate but to keep rhythm, to keep courage alive when the wind tried to tear it away. The songs were crude and dark, sometimes just grunts and chants, but in that noise they found focus. They reminded themselves that they were still alive, still fighting. Storm after storm, pirates learned to read the ocean like a living thing. The color of the water, the scent of rain, the pitch of the wind, all whispered clues of what was coming. They could sense when a squall would break and when it would pass. They could feel it in their bones as if the sea itself spoke to them. It was not science. It was survival. And those who mastered it became legends, but skill alone wasn't enough. Even the sharpest sailor could be undone by one wrong wave. To live through it, pirates needed tricks, clever, desperate, and sometimes brutal methods forged by trial and blood. When a storm threatened, the crew would strip the ship bare. They lowered the yards, lashed the guns, secured every line. Loose cargo was tied down or thrown overboard. Hatches were sealed tight, though it meant trapping air, and men inside. Then came the sails. Too much canvas and the wind would tear the masts clean off. Too little, and the ship would drift helplessly broadside at the mercy of the waves. The art was in balance, so I'd enough sail to keep control, not enough to die for it. They called it lying to, angling the ship against the storm, letting her drift while keeping her head into the waves. A delicate dance. One wrong move and the sea would roll her over. If the storm hit too hard, they'd drop a sea anchor, a makeshift drag of barrels and rope tossed overboard to slow the ship's spin. It wasn't elegant, but it worked. Some captains even ordered the masts cut down entirely. Better to drift alive than to fight dead. The crew would curse as their proud vessel was hacked to pieces, but when the storm eased and they were still breathing, no one complained, and when all else failed, there was prayer. Not to God, usually. To the sea herself. They whispered to her like a lover, a mother, a monster. Promised her rum and song if she let them live. Sometimes she listened. Sometimes she didn't. And when she didn't, when she decided to collect her due, the ocean became a graveyard of dreams. The survivors would never forget those nights, and the wrecks they left behind told the rest of the story. Not every ship survived. In the shallow waters of the Bahamas and the Florida Keys, the bones of pirate ships still sleep, ribs of oak buried in sand, ghosts of men who never made it home. When the storm was too strong, when the pumps failed or the hull split, there was only one choice left: run for land, and any land. They'd steer blind toward what they hoped was a shoreline, praying not to hit the reefs that hid like knives beneath the surf. Sometimes they made it. They'd beach the ship, leap into waist-deep water, drag their wounded brothers ashore, and watch their vessel break apart behind them. Sometimes they didn't. The sea would take the ship, the men, and the plunder, leaving nothing but a name whispered among sailors for years to come. Even the great ones met their end this way. Blackbeard's Queen Anne's Revenge lost to the reefs. Calico Jack Rackham, storm-tossed and captured soon after. Countless others who thought themselves masters of the sea, all humbled by her. For pirates, storms were not rare misfortunes. They were the cost of doing business. And yet, for every wreck there was a story, a tale told in taverns, a lesson passed from deck to deck. Because storms did more than kill pirates, and they changed them. Storms stripped them of everything: gold, pride, illusion. Left only the truth, a trembling hand on a wet rope, a beating heart in the dark. It was in those moments that pirates became something closer to poets. They saw how small they were, how fragile life was, and yet how stubbornly it clung. When the sun finally broke through, the survivors stood barefoot on the ruined deck, blinking against the light. The ship groaned, half broken but alive. The air smelled of salt and smoke and victory, and every man who breathed that air felt reborn. They had faced the sea and survived. That alone was worth more than any treasure. They'd set the rigging again, dry the powder, mend the sails. And by the next sunrise, they'd be laughing, drinking, and plotting their next hunt. because pirates had short memories for fear, and even shorter lives. But to understand how storms shaped them so completely, we must see what came next, the strange quiet after the fury, when men began to rebuild what the sea had torn apart. In the age of empires, storms were feared. For pirates, they were teachers. They taught humility, that no man commands the sea. They taught unity, that survival depends on every hand, not the strongest voice. They taught adaptation, to move fast, to improvise, to make a sail from a shirt and a mast from a broken spar. And they taught freedom, the kind that comes only when you have nothing left to lose. A pirate who survived enough storms walked with a strange calm afterward. You could see it in his eyes, that far-off look of someone who has stared into the void and seen it blink. He no longer feared the navy or the gallows. He had already faced the truest power in the world, and lived. And when the last cloud broke, when the wind finally softened, that's when the truest silence of all arrived. Men step cautiously into the light. Every board drips. Every rope sags. The ship looks older, wounded, but proud. And the pirates, barefoot and hollow-eyed, look around as if waking from a dream. They check the losses. A mast gone, a sail shredded, a few men missing. Their names are spoken quietly. There is no funeral, no tears. Only a toast, a sip of rum poured into the sea. Because the sea took them and the sea will remember. Then the crew begins to work. They patch the canvas, mend the lines, scrape the salt from the guns, and the laughter slowly returns. Jokes, curses, songs. The human noise of life clawing its way back from the edge. That's the pirate way. Grieve fast. Repair faster. Move on. Because another storm always waits beyond the horizon, and perhaps that's why the pirate's story still echoes. Not for their crimes, but for what they endured. For the way they faced something unstoppable and somehow kept sailing into it anyway. In the end, the shocking way pirate ships dealt with storms wasn't in the ropes they tied or the sails they cut. It was in their acceptance. They didn't fight the sea, they danced with it. They learned its moods, feared it, loved it, and died by it. A pirate's ship was his world, floating wood, salt, and brotherhood bound together by trust and desperation. Every creak of the hull was a heartbeat, every gust of wind a whisper of fate, and in storms that world was tested, torn apart and reborn with each wave. The empires that hunted them are gone now. The flags, the forts, the laws, all swallowed by time. But the sea remains. And somewhere beneath it, beneath the calm blue surface of modern waters, the bones of pirate ships still rest, silent, patient, waiting. If you listen closely on a quiet night, you can almost hear it. The echo of a song carried by the wind, the rhythm of oars against water, and the faint whisper of laughter from men who once dared to fight the sea itself, because the sea may take everything. But legends? Legends float,